Christian Hauglie-Hanssen, Director General of the Norwegian Space Agency. Thank you very much for joining us on AnewZ.
I'm happy to be here.
I'd like to start by getting into this link between space and climate change. Can you explain a bit more about that for us?
Yes, I think this is a very important question, and it's important for the general population to be aware because it is a very powerful tool. It's also important to be aware that sometimes observation from space, to call it that, is unique. For instance, in covering the Arctic and large ocean areas, and sometimes it's supplementary to measurements that you do on the ground. And it's very important to have this respect that these things happen together in terms of how you do the investments and how you sort of specify what the satellites are going to do. But they do serve as a very, very important feed of data. And you can actually tailor-make these satellites in order to identify specific things that you want to observe from space.
So there are many different variables then you can track. It's not just the obvious visual things.
That's right. And you basically use what we call the whole spectrum. From the optical, you take pictures and you can see changes in agriculture and forestry with different types of resolution. But you could also expand this into what we call the infrared, thermal emissions from industry and from other sources. And then you can move on into the radio spectrum. You can use radars to do observations. The good thing with the radars is that they can look through clouds. So for Norway in particular, radars are very useful. It's dark most of the year, as you know, or at least half the year. Dark weather a lot of the time, and we need to also observe what's going on in the Arctic. So we're using all different capacities.
And you're meeting today other Director Generals of other space agencies from around the world. Mm-hmm. What are your hopes for what you can achieve together?
Well, I think it was encouraging. First of all, that people take the time to come together at COP. So this was the second time that there's actually a Space Leaders Summit. Previous year in Dubai, we had the same thing. People generally have the same view, the importance of working together, of sharing data, and seeing this as long-term. And there you are again, looking at the advantages of using satellites because they are really efficient in gathering long-term time series and observations. That's why, because some of these changes that we see from climate, they really happen over time. So it's important to have these long data series. So the consensus that this is important to work on jointly and with joint funding. But looking ahead, you hear different opinions or statements on the different approaches in terms of what they're doing on the satellite level, what they're doing on the services, which is exceedingly important, and the approach is a little bit different because they have different focuses.
So here in Azerbaijan at COP29, there's been a bringing together of the different space agencies. Do you expect that will bring efficiencies, synergies in the work to combat climate change going forward?
I think it will. I mean, we need to be patient, but there is also urgency, and we are seeing some of the actions that were mentioned in the summit today are very concise. Countries that develop Earth observation capacities for targeting CO2 emissions, for providing overview over methane and greenhouse gases, and also direct imagery of the actual changes that you can see. So both observing the changes in the atmosphere, the changes to CO2 content and the temperature and climate, but also the effects that it has on the ground and in the oceans.
And when you're working as this sort of extended team, if you like, of different nations, do you find, like in all teams, there are certain skills and capabilities that Azerbaijan is strong in, that Norway is strong in? Are there different strengths for the different space agencies?
Yes, certainly. Starting with Norway, obviously we have our own priorities. Being a coastal nation, relying heavily on fishery, oil and gas sector, having special interest in the Arctic, that would be the baseline for what we're doing. Our approach is threefold. First of all, we are a participating nation to both the European Space Agency and also the EU space program, in particular the Copernicus program with the Sentinel Earth observation satellite. So we are a free user of those data. What is different from Norway is that we have national funds where we're actually using these data And in addition to the Copernicus, what we call the core services, we are also making services that are of particular interest to us. For instance, ice monitoring in the Arctic, landslides, avalanches, and the changes in the permafrost in the Arctic, for mentioning one.
Okay, so a lot more work to be done. You've been here today. How do you feel? What's your reflections on COP29 so far?
Well, I've had the chance to participate at meetings all the way from a general meeting with Dr. Guterres, hearing an overview on the approach towards early warning for extreme heat, which of course can affect huge parts of the population of the world, to more specific discussions on how to treat the cooling industry. I mean, the refrigeration and how you cool the food and produce, and how you're using that in order to build up under the sustainability of agriculture, for instance, because that is a significant contributor to the global heating. So I think both from the pragmatic to the more overarching elements have been discussed. So that has been of value.
Fantastic, fascinating work. Director General, thank you so much for joining us on AnewZ.
Thank you very much.